It's story time again, and today we've got a doozy. Now, from the day that I took my first drag of a joint that would probably look like a pencil lead, that it was so skinny that I was hooked. I was like, it became my favorite drug, my favorite thing to do. Nothing else mattered except for getting high. Now this was 66, 65, somewhere in there. Everybody was getting high at that point. And back in those days, it was just before the whole Love Generation began. I was scrambling around on Tennyson Road in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and looking, you could buy some pot, just totally crapola Colombian pot that just, was half seeds and the other half was sticks. But it worked, and it was they sold it in a matchbox, a little matchbox about that big, and it was $5 for a matchbox. You could roll up 10 really skinny joints. Mostly you were smoking paper. But within a couple of years, you were buying bags of marijuana for $5, and the whole thing just exploded, and it was still that rock gut Colombian stuff with half seeds. Anyhow, so I was in Nick heaven. Just smoking as much pot as I could get a hold of. We'd hang out in my buddy's garage, and it was our little smoking den. And anyhow, through that period, I hooked up with a woman that was 11 years older than me, and she just wasn't that interested in marijuana. And she didn't want me to smoke marijuana, and I was playing along because, she was pretty hot and sexy, and so we made an agreement, and I started my motorcycle shop at that point, and it was just in her garage. I was fixing a bike here and a bike there, and, building one for myself, and, starting to make a name for myself. So the agreement was I could only smoke on the weekends. And I was happy with that because I needed to concentrate during the week. And we went through, prior to that agreement, I was, all over the map doing pot and acid and whatever drug came along, except heroin, of course. So anyhow, I'm working in my shop. As I said, I'm starting to make a name for myself, and I ended up moving out to Fremont, and got this little shop on a kind of in a back little corner. It was perfect, and I had the shop going, and things were kind of moving along fairly well, and I ended up hiring my good buddy Wally Buck. Now, Wally Buck was a machinist, and I was just getting into doing machine work at that point. Maybe I'm 19 at that point. And he was able to kind of come in and show me some tricks and, just kind of how to do it. But back then there was no YouTube, so of course, you couldn't, depend on anything else other than your buddy. So he kind of got me started on that, and we made these things and we made those things, and when the weekend came, I would close my doors at 5 o'clock and light up, and what would happen was everybody that I knew, all my friends, would show up at the shop at about 4:30 and hang out and wait for the 5 o'clock bell to happen, which it did. When it did, I'd close the doors, everybody'd come inside, we'd get stoned out of our minds, have a great time, maybe drink some beers, and just all around have a good time. And for me, smoking pot, I mean, for most people, smoking pot, you know, you lay down, you become a couch potato because you're so stoned you can't see straight. For me, it was just the opposite. I would get wired up. I would get incredibly creative. I would do these wild, crazy things artistically, even though at that point I didn't know I was an artist. And at one point, you know, once the party was over, after a couple of hours, everybody went home for dinner. It was just Wally and I, and we were kind of talking and having a good time. And we came up on the idea, and, you know, we're rolling joints and smoking more, and we came up on the idea of some kind of little roach clip, you know, a thing that you could hold the last little part of the joint with. And I don't know, you know, one thing led to another. There was a bullet casing laying around, a 22 Magnum bullet casing laying around. And, you know, we had this kind of cool idea, got really creative. Oh, actually, no, it wasn't a bullet casing. We actually made the casing out of a piece of brass rod. And, you know, we're like just bouncing off of each other with ideas. And so we come up with this little bullet casing and a bullet head. The casing's out of brass, the bullet head is out of aluminum, and it literally slides apart. Let me get you one and I'll show it to you. Now this is actually the later version, but it still kind of gives you an idea. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not. So it's a ring and a cotter pin. Uh-oh, there's a little bit of stain on that one. And then the casing comes apart to give you a little extension. So it's kind of like a little cigarette holder, except for pot. Okay. So you kind of got the general gist of the idea. Here is one that we made later on when things started getting really working, and it's called the Berkeley Bullet. And that's you know, that's literally been in that case for what, 47 years now, and it's still polished, which is, you know, saying something. So let's go on with the story. Where was I? Oh yeah, we're a creative evening. We're having a great time making one roach clip. And, you know, we've come up with a cotter pin and the little ring off of a key ring. And we're, you know, kind of excited about it. And, you know, Wally goes home, I go home, you know, I show it to my girlfriend. You know, she's not that impressed with it because, of course, she's not a pot smoker. But I take it to the burger broiler the next morning in town, and which is like the morning hangout. Show up. It was like this little hole in the wall. It couldn't have been 20 feet by 10 feet. And, you know, there might have been 2 tables and a countertop. 20 people could be in there at any given moment. But we all loved going there. And so for breakfast and for lunch. So anyhow, I take it into the burger broiler and I pass it around. And, you know, I know everybody in there because I go there pretty much every day. And I pass it around. Everybody's just very excited about it. They're, oh, this is the coolest thing in the world. And just, oh, yeah, I get pretty stimulated by that. So once I'm done with breakfast, I go on over to my shop. And Wally shows up, and we kind of talked about what had happened the night before, and I told him about the burger broiler, and he says, well, hell, why don't we make 100 of them? And I went, yeah, let's do that. So, maybe we can make some money doing that, and in those days, there were head shops everywhere. They were selling roach clips and, all of the paraphernalia. And it was like, every town had 2 or 3 head shops. And so we decided, okay, so let's just buy a piece of aluminum rod and buy a piece of brass rod. And in fact, if I remember correctly, we used a piece of welding rod, like 1/4-inch welding rod. And we set it up in the lathe, and we turned out 100 of them in about, 3 or 4 hours. And, we got them all together and finished them and polished them up real good. And I took them to the burger broiler the next day, and I'm thinking, well, I'll sell 10 or 15 or 20 of them. And I was selling them for $5. And they cost probably, who knows, maybe 50 cents to make. And in those days, $5 was a fair amount of money. So I was thinking, well, probably going to have to come down on the price or something. Walked into the burger broiler, sold all 100 of them within about a half an hour. I was like, really? People were buying 5 and 6 at a time. And I was like, wow. I go back, and Wally is, at my shop, and I said, here's $50. And we both got pretty jazzed. And he says, okay, now let's go into production here. And I'm all of a sudden starting to see Cadillacs and, buying a nice house and, the same old scenario. And I'm just like, whoa, this is so cool. So we went and we contacted Winchester and asked them about, well, first we went out and scrounged around a shooting range and came up with a bunch of 22 Magnum bullet casings. And we drilled them out and made the rest of the parts. And we made another 100 of them and sold those almost immediately. Now we were like pretty jazzed because, as I said, there was hundreds of head shops everywhere. And I'm thinking, put it in a head shop and, you're going to make some bank. So we went to to Winchester, and we said, well, we'd like to buy, 500 shells. And Winchester says, and we don't want you to, put the bullets in them or anything. And Winchester says, well, we can't really do that because the way we make them, 500 is like, 10 seconds or, 2 minutes or something like that. They said, so our minimum order is 5,000. And we're like, oh man, 5,000. And I think it was, for 5,000, it was $75 or some ridiculously low price. But we took the money that we made from the 2 times that we did sell, and we took that and put it into getting the 5,000. And about a month later, and then we ordered, we went to a screw machine shop and ordered 5,000 of the aluminum parts. And during that time, I made some jigs so that we could crush the shell and hold on to the aluminum. And we just kind of got things ready. And so we get all the parts together. We make the product. And I showed you the little packet. We got the little plastic bag and made up the labels. And we took them out, and I had already had a run going that I drove around the Bay Area once a week and sold motorcycle parts. parts that I manufactured. So it was really easy to just add a head shop in that was, usually within a couple of blocks of the motorcycle shop that I normally went to. So I went to all these head shops and sold them. And, sometimes put them on consignment because they weren't sure. Well, they sold, and really at that point I divorced my wife, the girlfriend that I had started with. We married. Then a couple of years later, we got divorced, and I closed my motorcycle shop, and I went back to college. And I pretty much landed in the art department and just stayed there. That's where I wanted to be. I realized I was an artist. So, and I had no way of making money. But these little roach clips took me right through that entire year. And the head shops, and I'd go hit the head shops once a week, and sure enough, they'd buy more, and I had 5,000 sitting there, and, I'd give half of it to Wally, and did okay. And it literally, those little bullet roach clips paid for my college for that 1 year. And then when the year was over, I moved to Nevada City. And I wasn't really interested in making money at that point. I was 24. I just wanted to lay on the rocks at the river and just hang out. So I just put those bullets aside. I probably had, 200 or 300 of them left. And I put them aside and just went on and did, the other parts of my life. And about, 2 or 3 years later, one of the head shops, the guy that owned the head shop, calls me up. He said, "Nick, I really like those bullet roach clips. Do you have any more?" And I said, "Well, I don't really have any more, mostly because they were stashed and I, didn't want to go get them." And, I was broke at that point. I was living in a little cabin out in the woods, paying $35 a month rent, and I think utilities was $11, and I was 7 months behind. But, I didn't want money. I wasn't really interested in money. It was like, that whole corporate America thing. No, thank you. So anyhow, he says, "Well, if you don't have any more, do you want to sell me the rights and the tooling?" I said, "Well, okay, I'll sell them to you." He says, "How about $500? And $500, man, that was 1973. That was like, $5,000 at this point. And it was just like, yeah, I'll sell them. So I sold him the rights and sold him all of their tooling to do it. But he says, I don't have anybody to make them. Why don't you make them for me? I said, he says, "I'll pay you by the hour to do it." I said, okay. So he takes the whole project over. He orders 50,000 shells. That's like 4 or 5 55-gallon drums of these shells. I think 35-gallon drums. And orders the bullet heads and orders the label and the bags, and it gets everything all together, has it all sent to me, and I'm making these things like nobody's business, having a great time making money, and I don't have to go get a job. I could just do it on my own in my garage house. So we get to the end. I make the first 5,000 for him, and he says, "Okay, we'll sell the 5, and I'll recoup some of my money, and then we'll go ahead and continue making them." And I got one of these barrels of shells and a barrel of the bullet part. And so I get the 5,000 done, and I send them to him, and he puts them in his shop as, you know, the first batch. And that very first day, a news camera or a news person comes into his shop and takes a photograph of the bullet roach clip. Now, he was really proud that they were going to, you know, advertise it, because he was going to, this was going to go nationwide. And it would have. But what happened was that it was the beginning of the war on drugs. And that became the mascot of the war on drugs. This little bullet, this picture became the mascot of the war on drugs, and every newspaper carried it. This guy ate it big time. And so what happened was, you know, that was it. It was over. You know, he was able to go on and do other stuff, and I went on and did other stuff. And I ended up with, as I said, with about 300 or 400 of these in a box, kind of stashed in a back corner. And over the years, I have given away one or two here, and, you know, told the story and given away a couple here and there. And I literally have one bag left of about a dozen of them. And that's one. And that is the story of the Berkeley Bullet. This is Nick Collier. Checking out.